I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today. Our speaker is Nina DeRosa. She is a retired nurse and lifetime gardener and became an extension master gardener in 2016. She is currently the coordinator of one of our demonstration gardens called the Organic Vegetable Garden, and also spends a lot of her time caring for her own flower and veggie garden. You'll see she enjoys learning and sharing information with others to improve gardening experiences. Nina, thank you very much, and we're all looking forward to your talk.
Thank you, Colleen, for the introduction. Welcome. If you are a new gardener or an advanced gardener wanting to improve yield and reduce work, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to talk about square foot gardening. And this was invented by Mel Bartholomew. You see him right here. He was an engineer and he started to garden, and he went around and looked at people's gardens, and it was all backed by conventional gardening, row methods, in ground. And he saw that everybody was so enthusiastic in the beginning of the season. But by August, everybody's gardens were pest laden and just abandoned because of the amount of work. So he said, I think we could do something better. And I highly recommend this book. I don't know if you could see it. It's Square Foot Gardening. It has so much information in here. As you can tell, mine is like in pieces because I use it so much. It's a great book. He has many books and they're listed at the end of this presentation. So as I was talking about Mel, he's a civil engineer, and he really gave it hard thought about, why do we have rows? Why do we need so much space? Because if you look at the seed packets, you don't need to spread everything out like that. So he said, I'm going to make a square foot for each vegetable and plant it according to the requirements of the plants. So he developed this method, and he actually uses it overseas to feed third world countries because you really don't need soil. We'll get into that when we talk about Mel's mix and the growing medium that he has devised. So we want to save time. We want to not put so much effort into it. We don't want to go out and buy a million tools for gardening. We don't have a lot of space, and we don't want to spend hours watering. So let's just take a look at row gardening versus square foot gardening. Okay, if you've ever done gardening, you know you have to break up the soil. If you don't break it up and do no-till and you keep piling things on, it takes at least 3 years to develop a good soil. You have to water. You have waste seeds. If you garden, you know that when you plant seeds, everyone overseeds. And then you have to thin everything and throw all those little babies away, or do things like I do, is take those and put them other places, and you have 50 pepper plants growing. So that's ridiculous. So you want to save seeds, you want to save water, you don't want to kill yourself, but you still want to have a good harvest and enjoy gardening. So the first thing you'd want to do is say, where are you going to put your garden? You always want to have the garden in a north-south facing direction to make sure that you get the most sun you can on your garden. And that makes total sense. So you want to pick a spot that has at least 4 to 8 hours of sun. 6 hours is pretty much the optimal. And you want to make sure that it's not in a swampy location. You want it to be draining. You don't want to put it on top of something that's going to be soggy and wet. If you can't do that, you can put it on a deck. This type of thing is very versatile. Square foot gardening can be placed on a rooftop, on a sidewalk or driveway, in a field, anywhere. It's just so versatile for putting in different places. So when you find your location, you want to make sure the sunlight that you will be giving this square foot garden. Now, when they talk about sunlight requirements, they talk about low sunlight. What does that mean? That means 3 to 4 hours of sunlight. You can grow all kinds of greens in that, maybe a few onions, bunching onions. So you could get a good salad garden with 3 to 4 hours, and definitely an herb garden. With medium sun, 4 to 6, you can grow pretty substantial vegetables, beets, broccoli. I mean, that's pretty good. So the combination of those two, you can really have a high yield square foot garden. Now with the 6 to 8 hours of sun, you can get into your fruiting vegetables, your eggplants, your peppers. So if you have 6 to 8 hours of sun, it's optimal for your square foot garden. but don't get discouraged because you can grow things with only 3 to 4 hours of sun. So here you see what you will have available to you if you have limited amount of sun. You can grow all kinds of herbs, and there's nothing better than going out when you're cooking and picking fresh herbs right out of your garden. The taste is unreal. It's so much better. You know, if you shopped at a farmer's market, how the taste is so much different from what you buy in the supermarkets. There are other shade tolerant plants, garlic, potatoes, spinach. Spinach is really good. You don't really need much to feed a whole family. That's why the square foot garden really works. Now you also want to consider where you're going to get your water supply. Are you going to have to haul water? Maybe you want to get a rain barrel and set it up to catch rain, and then supplement the water with filling it up with a hose. And then maybe that would last you for a week or two, depending on what kind of weather you have. And you could just take it from the rain barrel. Or you could set up a watering system. In the top right, you have a PVC watering system. They just put PVC pipes that they've used for the grid, actually, for the square foot garden. And that also doubles as an irrigation system. And remember that when you're watering the roots, not the top of the plant. Because when you water the top of the plant, you're opening it up to all kinds of fungal diseases, soil-borne diseases that might splash off the soil into your leaves. So really think about that when you water. Mel likes hand watering because it's just a square foot. You can have a little bucket next to you and use a cup and water your vegetables individually. It doesn't take that long. It's only a 4x4 plot you're going to start out with. And it gives you a chance to examine your vegetables, see if you have any problems with fungus or bugs, or, if something needs to be pulled so that doesn't affect the other vegetables in the garden. So with a conventional size garden, it's recommended that you need about 100 to 200 square feet of garden space to feed one person. That's a lot of space, and it's a lot of effort to maintain the soil and to water and to weed. But with a square foot garden, you could use one block. And when I talk about a block, I'm talking about a 4x4 block. That's one block. And within that block, you have 16 squares. So you can grow 16 different types of vegetables. And Mel recommends that if you plant in March, you start your vegetables in March, you'll have to buy or start seed with the cauliflower and the broccoli, and the rest is all direct seed into the ground. So you could just put the seed in there. And by the time you have 2 months and you've planted these, you will have all of this produce: 4 heads of oak leaf lettuce, 16 standard carrots, 9 bunches of, that's supposed to be spinach, I'm sorry, and 32 radishes. I mean, look at the amount of stuff you would grow in just 16 square feet compared to the 100 or 200 square feet that you need for our conventional garden. And if you look at that garden, you can tell that things have grown nicely. They're not too crowded, but you don't see any weeds. The competition for weeds is too great. They won't sustain weeds, so you don't have to weed. The soil is perfect for growing. We'll get into that when I talk about Mel's mix. The only things that you have to start with are building your bed and putting in your soil. And after that, it's really, really easy. Trust me, I've done it several times. You'd be surprised on how much you can grow without the discouragement of a regular conventional garden. If you want to grow for one person, you need 4x4. That's to get some lettuce and to supplement. But if you want to supply vegetables for one person, complete vegetables, all the vegetables you need for the summer, you need 2 blocks. So that's 2 16 square foot blocks. And you should start off small. So start off with 1 4x4. See how that goes. And if you get excited about it and you want to have an abundance of crop so that you can freeze or you can, then you will add blocks accordingly to the needs of your family. So for the amount of work for 1 block, 16 square feet, Mel says that you would need about an hour a week to work on your garden. Now we have a square foot garden at Overlook Organic Garden. It's in Potomac Overlook Regional Park in Arlington, Virginia. And we have a square foot garden that we demonstrate. And it's really very low maintenance. I think the most maintenance we have is during harvest time. And we grow a lot of stuff. People are very surprised how much produce we get from that little garden. So if you ever are in the area in Arlington and you want to come by, we're there every Wednesday morning and Saturday morning. And we'd be happy to show you around. So now you want to decide, what are you going to make your bed out of? There's so many things you can use. You can use wood, you can use stone, metal, cinder block. It's really easy thing to do. And once you build that, especially with the stone or the cinder block, I think they last for, several years. I think you could get at least 7 to 10 years out of a bed. And now you can use pressure treat lumber for your bed, because the pressure treat now is not created by arsenic. They use copper, they use minerals to make it last longer when it comes in contact with dirt. So it's safe to use that. Never make your garden wider than 4 feet, because you want to be able to reach across, even if you want to make it 3 foot. But you don't want to make it too wide, because then you don't want to walk in it. You don't want to compress your soil. So that's the whole beauty of the raised bed. You don't walk on it and the soil stays really nice. Now, remember, if you're going to make it long, I wouldn't suggest you make it longer than 8 feet, because remember, you want to get around the sides of the whole bed. So the longer you make it, the more time you're going to spend, circling your gardens. And I found that 8 feet is the best. In our garden, we have 20 feet and 26 feet, and it works for us because we have a lot of help. This is an example. This is just instructions if you want to build a wooden bed that's a 4 foot wide by 4 feet long, 6 inches deep. So this is what you would use. You just use 2 8-foot 2x6s. Okay, you cut one in half and you have your bed design. You attach it and then you add your soil. I would recommend that you put cardboard underneath if you're putting it on grass. Even if you're putting it on a sidewalk or a driveway, you could put some weed barrier or cardboard down just to keep things in your bed. Now, 6 inches is deep enough for bunching onions, greens, things with shallow roots. But if you're really thinking you're going to stick with this and get into it, I would recommend at least 12 inches. And then you're covered with any kind of vegetable you want to put in there. So Mel recommends Mel's mix. And what is it? It's 1/3 vermiculite, 1/3 peat moss, and 1/3 blended compost. And this is a pH neutral soil, very nutrient rich. It drains, but it doesn't dry out because of the peat moss. Now, there's been a lot of talk about peat moss and its non-sustainability. Let's talk about peat moss. What is it? Peat moss, it's decayed organic matter, and it usually occurs in cold, marshy ecosystems. It's very slow growing, and both United States and Europe have managed their peat bogs really poorly. So we poo-pooed the idea of using peat moss, and everybody's looking for alternatives. But what I've read is that Canada supplies 80% of North America's peat moss. Okay. And the amount of peat moss that they harvest is about 20% of the peat moss. So that's 0.02% of their entire supply of peat. So they're really managing it in a very sustainable way, and they're not affecting the climate. Because, peat bogs are a big carbon sink. So everybody's in an uproar because we're taking all that away. And with our climate issues, we're releasing all this carbon into the atmosphere. Canada is not doing that. Okay, they have a peat moss association in Canada that maintains proper management, harvest practices, and they continue to research to make sure that they do peat moss harvesting in a most renewable fashion. And there's actually an article in The Ecologist, and I've cited where I found that article. And they have been recognizing that peat is a very valuable resource, and they're taking care of it like that. And they're assuring us that they're managing it, that it's not harmful to the environment. So I would say, if you're going to buy peat moss, make sure it's Canadian peat moss. is available everywhere. It's not something that you have to search for, except in our present situation with Canada, the price might go up or we might have a limited supply. Now, for those of you who still would like to do alternatives to peat moss, you can use coconut coir. It's sustainable, but they use a lot of water to manufacture it because it has a lot of salt in it and they have to desalinize it. So that's not really good for the environment either. And they have to ship it and they have to ship everything. But I think it's less sustainable than that Canadian peat. Okay, there's another thing that you could use is called pit moss, not peat moss, but pit moss. And it's made from a cellulose paper material. It's also biodegradable and it heats up really well if you use it in compost bins. And the good thing about this is you're taking all that biodegradable stuff and keeping it out of the landfill. So that's a good thing. All of these substances have very little nutrient value. Even aged compost, which is the best. I love compost. It's easy to make. You can buy it and it's good for the soil. It has a little bit of nutrient, but you really wouldn't say compost is a fertilizer. It's more of a soil structure builder. I want to talk to you about Canadian peat and why Mel uses peat and why peat is so special. There's a thing called a cation exchange capacity. And that means the ability of a material to increase its magnetism or making the soil able to hold more water and minerals. And they measure the soil by its mostly structure. So when you use peat, they have a CEC of 110. So what you're doing is you're improving the structure of your soil and making it able to hold on to nutrients and water that much more. Okay, I don't know what the CEC for pit moss is, but for coconut coir, it's 50%. So you can be the judge of what you'd want to use in your garden. I think I would use peat moss. And also to keep in mind, the soil is negatively charged and the minerals in the soil are positively charged. So when you build the structure of your soil, so you're making the soil molecules bigger, you're sticking them together, or you're making aggregates. So when you have good organic material in your soil, the organisms that eat that organic matter will exudate and stick the soil together, making it larger and having a stronger negative charge. So that gives it much more ability to grab onto water and grab onto minerals. So this is all about soil structure and what you're going to use to build your soil structure. So if you use anything other than peat moss, you're going to have to make sure that you keep an eye on your pH. I don't think you will have to do that if you use compost, because compost naturally balances your pH in your soil. It's really the best. Also, compost does dry out a little bit faster than peat moss, so you could add a little bit more vermiculite to hold the water. And you'll have to play with that and adjust how many times you have to water. But if you have a good structure in your soil, you'll be able to hold a lot of water. Peat moss can hold 20 times more water than its weight. So it's really good for moisture. So we're gonna also add in our square foot garden, every time we change plants or we harvest, we have a square that's empty. We're gonna add a scoop of compost before we plant a new plant in that particular square. And that's how we're gonna keep the fertility of our growing medium. It's supposed to last for 10 years if you follow this method. You also want to leave the roots of the plants that you've harvested because they are going to decompose in your soil. They're going to leave air pockets in your soil, which is really good for letting in moisture, for letting your roots grow through those places where the roots are rotting. And it also provides nutrients. And if you decide not to extend your growing season, you want to cover your bed with leaves or compost, or if you've done a soil test and you know you're lacking in some mineral, you want to add that, because you're always going to prepare your soil in the fall for the next season. So it gives it time to all gel together. Okay, so I built my garden, and how much soil do I actually need? If we're going to do a 4 by 8 foot box that's 6 inches tall, we just multiply the length times the width. And we're only going to do 6 inches deep, so we're going to divide it by 2, and we're going to get 16 cubic feet. And if you're going to do a 1 foot deep, you're going to have to double that. You're going to need 32 cubic feet. And then you would divide that into thirds, and you know how much peat moss, how much vermiculite, and how much compost you're going to need for your bed. If you decide to make it deeper than 12 inches, if your back can't tolerate bending, want to make it maybe 24 inches, you can use this method called hugelkultur. And what it does is initially it reduces the need for the soil. So you're going to cut back on the amount of soil you need by filling the bottom of your bed with tree wood debris, like small branches, especially the smaller ones cut up, and any compostable yard waste that is disease-free, and you're going to add it to the bottom of the bed and squish it all down. And then you will reduce the need for all the soil for 24 inches. This is a really good thing because you're feeding your soil underneath. It's not robbing anything from the top 6 inches of your bed because the nitrogen isn't being robbed. This is way below the roots, and it's totally fine. You're not going to disrupt the need for nitrogen. So as this deteriorates, you're going to have really gorgeous compost down on the bottom, but it will sink. So every year, remember, you're going to have to add leaf mulch or that extra amount of compost so that you can make more soil during the winter months if you're not going to use your garden. What we do at our garden, we have a 5,000 square foot garden, and it's been there for a long time. And our walkways in between our beds have been wood chipped. So we have layers of wood chips. And we just redid our bed. We went from in-ground to raised beds, and we needed an awful lot of soil. So we did the hugelkultur, and we actually had to purchase soil, which was not the greatest. It's better to use soil that's on your property because, you know, the soil you get, you don't know, from new houses, they probably take the topsoil and God knows what else is in there. So you're better off using your own soil. So now when we need soil, we brush away the wood chips in the paths of our beds, and we remove the first 6 inches because those wood chips have been rotting for years and years, and that soil is beautiful. So we dig that up, fill that hole with wood chips, and we keep doing that all around the garden to fill the beds because of our hugelkultur is decomposing and our soil is dropping. Okay, now we have our bed, we have our soil, and we're going to do the most important thing. We're going to put the grid in. And the grid is just perfect because we have a defined space. We know how much seeding we're going to put in 1 square foot. It keeps our plants neat, and we can see what we're doing in that 1 square foot. And because we're not wasting our space, we have it all gridded out, we're going to get more yield. So we are actually making the very most of our space by dividing it like that so we can keep an eye on each square and get the most out of it. And I don't advise string to mark that off. I like wood or PVC or something that's solid. Even people put 2x4s in there and keep it really separate because it really does help. I started off with string and it didn't work. I mean, it didn't like it. It didn't look as good. And it didn't keep things separate. So I would advise using wood or plastic or something. So we have our grid, we have our soil, we have our bed, everything's ready to roll and we're ready to plant. But we can't do that yet. We have to know what zone we're in because it's very important to know what time we're going to plant these. It's really crucial to the success of the seeds and the plants. So I'm in zone 7A right now, Northern Virginia. And the last frost date, these are the most important things if you're a gardener, the last frost date and the first frost date. So the last spring frost in our area is 4/15. They round it off, they give you leeway. You never know, sometimes we get snow in April. And then the first frost is around October. But to be honest, we have planted things in zone 7A in March. because of the climate change. And we always kind of push it. We always kind of put seeds in a little bit early just to see what will happen because we know there's climate change. So, I mean, if you put a seed or two in, you're not going to lose anything big, and you might get that crop to germinate, and then you'll be way ahead of the season. So try it, watch the weather. And if you do get a frost warning, you could always go cover your seed or your plants. I like to use all those millions of plant pots that I saved. You just get a big one and just put it right on top of the plant and secure it into the soil so it won't blow away. Or you could cover it with a sheet or a garden covering that you use during the winter if you grow in the winter. And a lot of these things, especially like lettuce, they're pretty hardy. They'll take one little frost if it's not that long. And you'll know as you plant, as you play with the vegetables that you're growing, you'll become acquainted with their growing needs, and you can figure out when to do things. So how do they do that? They just kind of take the minimum, the temperature and the weather, and they divide it by 10 degrees, and they kind of estimate or guesstimate. And we're 7A, and I have the question mark because we know that we are planting things a lot earlier, and we're planting things, black-eyed peas we're planting, that's zone 8. We're planting southern crops because we're demonstrating climate change in our organic garden. So we are trying to test out the southern crops and see how they do. We also have a taro root growing. It's a tropical plant that we have overwintered at least 2 years. We cover it with mounds and mounds of leaves, and it's come back. This year, we had a really cold winter, so we're still waiting to see if there's any activity in our taro root. But it's fun. It's fun to test new things and see if you can get them to grow. This chart comes from Virginia Tech Cooperative Extension, and it's a planting chart on when they suggest you plant things, when you harvest. So they have the spring and they have the fall, and they also have summer. So 3 seasons, spring, summer, and fall. If you choose to do that, you don't have to do that. You can just be happy and plant your tomatoes in the summer and then put your bed to sleep for the next time you want to use it, or keep some herbs in there that require very little maintenance. So you need to either buy plants, you'll have to buy plants, or you can start your seeds indoors. And usually you want to refer to your seed packets, but these cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, they're kind of common. And I know that you need to start them 4 to 6 weeks before the last frost. Tomatoes, you need to plant inside 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost. So, excuse my typos. So that's a guidance for you. If you're a crazy gardener, one year I started the growing inside, and I started in January. And I was so eager, I couldn't stand to be out of the soil. I had to have something to play with. And I tell you what, I had to transplant those plants, and I had a lot of them, 3 times because the pots were too small. So don't do that. Hold yourself back and wait until March to plant your seeds for your plants that are going out in the summer. And here's an example. There are different types of seed packets, but generally they tell you how to start indoors, what to do. They tell you the spacing. So it's all there. So just refer to that. And if you don't understand something, look it up on the internet, but all the information is there if you just follow it. I know a lot of people don't like instructions. I don't like instructions, but it's very helpful. And if you don't do that, you don't look at your seed packets, you can pull up on the internet, you can go to squarefootgardening.com. They have a whole foundation. They have all kinds of handouts, so much information, and they will tell you what the spacing is for your vegetables. Okay. The extra large vegetables, the melons, the zucchini, they tell you how many seeds you will put in 1 or 2 square foot. So they say watermelon needs 2 square foot. Personally, I don't think I would put a watermelon in a square foot garden. I would put it on the side of your garden and let it amble all over. It needs space. It's going to get crazy. It grows 20 feet long, so I don't think that's something for a square foot garden. Zucchini, I have actually grown zucchini in a 1 square foot. And what I do is I put that plant in there and I hang it over. So it's going to be on the eastern side of my garden, and I hang it over and it grows beautifully, and we get a good crop from that. And actually, by kind of hanging it over, you don't have it on the ground, so you want to prevent those squash borers. We've tried many things to prevent that. We've tried aluminum foil wrapped around the root, but it's a soil thing. They lay the specific squash borer, that beautiful moth will put its eggs in the soil, and then they crawl and eat into the zucchini. We've had that happen several times, and the last time I decided to use my nursing skills and did surgery and split the whole root of the trunk of it, and I pulled out all the squash borers and I covered it in the soil and replanted it, and it worked beautifully. Another thing that we could try is either planting it very early or very late. This year, we're trying to plant them late to avoid the squash borer. Another thing they say is you can plant it and put BT. It's a natural occurring hormone or enzyme that you can sprinkle around the root of the zucchini, and it'll prevent the squash borer from getting in. I don't know if that will work. We're going to try the late, and we'll report back at some time to see how that does. Melon is another thing I wouldn't waste 2 spots on. I would put on the outside. But all the other things on that website will tell you how many seeds to plant in each square foot. Now, these are some different garden accessories. Now, we talked initially about 6 inches of square foot garden. If you want to plant things that are deeper, you can do levels of your square foot. So you can do a 6-inch in the front. Maybe you could just put your herbs in the front. Then you could do another space that's 12. And then you could keep building on that to make it like a pyramid, to make it attractive, say at the edge of, looks like they put that at the edge of their patio. You could use cinder block, you could do wood, but it's attractive, and you have the soil depth for like a tomato you could put at the top. Just make sure that when you orient your square foot garden, it's north to south, and you put a trellis like we have in this picture on the north side so that it doesn't shade the sun from the rest of your garden. That's very important. So you see the trellis for growing things, and also it has a hoop if you want to cover it and grow in the winter. That's a good idea. Another thing is they have a cold frame that they can put over your square foot garden. Maybe you want to put it over only half of it, and you could grow things in the winter, or you could start your seeds earlier because your soil will heat up faster. And then this top one is a seed, you put your seeds in using this. It's a grid so that you get them perfect every time. It comes with a little seed dispenser and a funnel, so you can put it accurately to the depth that you want, and you won't waste seeds. I personally just use my hands, but the key is do not overseed. Trust me. I know everybody's like, oh, if I only put one, what if it doesn't come out? Just try it. If you have fresh seeds, they're going to work. And if it doesn't, you could always reseed. So don't waste your seeds. One seed packet can last you multiple years. You can even share with a friend and have plenty for yourself. I'm going to throw out some gardening terms here. Crop rotation. What is crop rotation? Crop rotation is really good to prevent disease and to keep your soil from being robbed of the same mineral, same thing every year. And it's pretty helpful. We use this at our garden. But the beauty of square foot gardening is you don't have to. Every time you harvest a plant, you put a different type of plant in, so you're crop rotating. It's no biggie. You don't have to worry about that. It takes all the stress out of that principle. You're doing it already. Companion planting. This is a really fun thing when you're planting. It used to be like folklore where you say, oh, if you plant this with this, it's, great. But they've done a lot of science on this. And actually, June 13th, we're presenting companion planting, and we'll go in depth and explain all the benefits of this and give you examples of what plants you should plant with what. So it does help with soil health because the roots will go down and grab more moisture and more minerals from deeper levels in the soil, from the subsoil. Because of the health of the soil, you'll get greater yields. Some of the companion plants will trap pests. They will also deter them from their smell or from their colors. It distracts the bugs and they don't go there. Also, companion planting can give you support. Like the three sisters, everybody knows the three sisters. It's the corn, the squash, and the beans. The beans climb up the corn, the squash shades the roots, it feeds the soil. It's a perfect meal. You have everything you need in those three crops. And also shade. If you put amaranth in, amaranth is the best companion plant. It just does wonders for your soil. And it's a taller plant, so it would also do shade. So it does multiple things. And the only thing with amaranth, you want to watch the seeds because you'll have amaranth everywhere. And this is just a little idea of what you could do. I think they have amaranth growing with the corn. They have marigolds, great to deter aphids. They have onions and lettuce go together. They help each other. The sunflowers and dill, borage keeps the cabbage flies off the cabbage. So, I mean, it all works really well together. I was reading about how weeds actually help the soil, not all weeds, but, we always want to have a manicured garden, but some weeds, if you really go, if you get into like the naturalist kind of way of thinking, some of these things are really fabulous. Nature always has a better way than we do. So don't think that you can do better than nature because you will always fail. Here's a list of things that you don't want to plant together. Beans and alliums or onions, because alliums exude a sulfur from their roots that deter the growth of bean roots. These are all things that we know don't work. Okay, so we don't want to do that. Now, in a square foot garden, if you want to grow beans and onions, you could put the beans on your trellis and you could put the onions in the front. And then maybe in between, you could put another row of companion flowers that will help both the beans and the onions. So there's always ways to grow what you want to grow, keep them separate, and use companion planting to help each crop grow. Now, succession planting is really good, especially if you have a larger garden. If you have a lot of squares, even if you're just one person and you don't want to have, 10 heads of lettuce at once. So what you do is you'll stagger planting. So you plant once a week, you plant a bean or a crop, and then you plant in a week, you plant another one. And you could do different varieties of beans, different varieties of lettuce. You'll prolong the harvest because you prolong the planting. And you can do that all season because they have lettuces that are heat tolerant and they're beautiful. They're red colored. They have beautiful colors to mix that up. And you get to taste different varieties of different crops. Because if you go to the store, you know that they sell iceberg lettuce, romaine lettuce, but there's so much more out there. And a lot of them don't travel well because they're so delicate, but you can grow them in your square foot garden. And you can also extend the harvest. If you want to take the whole head, cut the center out and leave the outside leaves, and that will grow back. Or you could do come and come, where you just take the lettuce leaves little by little until you need to take that plant out if it starts to bolt and plant a new one. But there are ways to prolong harvest besides succession planting. When you harvest, you can do it more sparingly so that that will continue to grow. Okay, so here's some layout ideas, and they're like theme gardens. If you go on the internet, there's so many ideas that are so interesting. So we'll just go over this. This one we already showed you, and you can use that as a beautiful herb garden right near your back door for your cooking. Well, here's an idea of a salsa garden. You can have salsa all season if you grow these plants. It's perfect, fresh salsa every week. It'd be gorgeous. You can have a square foot salad garden. Everything you want for a salad. You've got your onions. You could grow different types of lettuce. You can put some herbs in there. You can even throw some marigolds or something around the edges that would make it pretty. And you can just use your imagination, because 3 tomato plants, you're going to get a ton of tomatoes, more than you could possibly eat, unless you are crazy with tomatoes. I always find that I give so much away to food banks or neighbors because you can't possibly eat all this. So when you look at this, you think really nobody should go hungry with just this square. This is 4x4 area. You can grow so much food. And here's your herb garden. I like this because it's in a different configuration. So you can have it along the edge of your garden, in just a row of square foot little plots. You can grow flowers, you can grow climbing vines, you can grow climbing vines and herbs intermixed, you can grow herbs with flowers. I mean, it's just such a beautiful presentation of crops and flowers. Really nice. Now, this guy, he's on the internet, his name is On, and he does funny things where he'll do crop rotation. I'm just going to show you. I thought this was interesting. Okay, one year he did, it's like a rotation, a crop rotation. He did this one year he did nitrogen fixing crops. So he would do all legumes for 1 year. And he would grow these and he would use succession. So you'd have beans all summer. He threw in some anise plants to trap aphids. He put in beets because magnesium, it supplies beans magnesium. Celery because it will attract pollinators. It prevents soil fungus. And then he utilized a succession for the peas. So he would delay or grow peas. He'd harvest the peas. He put a different type of pea in that same square. So he would continually have peas of a different sort in the front row of his garden. The next year, he recommended that you do nitrogen consuming vegetables. And these are all heavy eaters, okay, that he said you can put these in. And they're cabbages, spinach, varieties of lettuce, bok choy, greens, and he put the borage in for cabbage butterfly. And the next year he did root vegetables. So if you're a root lover, you can have root vegetables all summer, probably into the fall, because radishes harvest really fast. You can have those, I think, within 30, 35 days. Beets take a little bit longer. Potatoes take longer, and your celery would be there. You could pick it as it grows. And carrots grow quickly too. You could have different varieties of carrots. They're so fun. You have the long, skinny ones. You have round carrots. There's so many different varieties. And it would be fun for children too, if you grow a root garden. We have children's camps come, and we always plant turnips, radishes, and carrots, and we let them pull them out. And it's amazing how many people don't realize that these carrots come from the ground or the potatoes come from the ground. It's just interesting to teach children, and it's fun. And the next you could do flowering vegetables. They're phosphorus loving vegetables. And you could do a whole row of indeterminate tomato plants. Now, I kind of found that a little bit hard to believe because my tomato plants get huge. So I thought if you did single stem growing, which is you can put a trellis right above the squares of your tomatoes and drop a single line down. And what you do is you take that string before you plant your tomato, and you always plant your tomatoes past the second row of leaves. So you cut them off and put them really deep because that will give them structure to hold in the soil. If you ever looked at a tomato stem, they have like furry little things all on the bottom. Those are all potentially new roots. So you want to give that tomato a lot of roots so it can feed really well and it gives it stability. So you want to bury that. And before you bury it, you want to put that string that you're going to secure the plant under the plant, and you put your tomato in. And then you take that string and tie it up to your trellis, okay? Leave a little bit of extra string in case you want to take it down for, like if you do a patio tomato. We can talk for hours about this, but when I was in Iceland, they have all their tomatoes grown in greenhouses because of the climate, obviously, and they have horrible soil. So they grow it in greenhouses, and they take them in a single stem method. So they're tying it to the top. It's a really high, it's about a 10-foot high. And they let the tomatoes grow all the way up there and they harvest them. They take all the leaves off the bottom and they let it roll down so that tomato can keep growing. And they keep it there for quite a few months before they plant another one. And the tomatoes were the most delicious tomatoes I've ever tasted. So you could do that with patio tomatoes, and you could do that with beefsteak. You can trellis them like that with single stem. And what you're doing is you're telling the tomato plants, you don't want to grow leaves, you want to grow fruit. So you keep those leaves trimmed considerably. So the tomato plant will put all its effort into growing fruit. So you don't want to have too much leafage on your tomatoes because it will get no sun. You might get fungus. So you want to keep them really airy. So if you do that, I would recommend that way to plant your tomato plants. You can do onions, marigolds, and peppers. Marigolds will help with the tomatoes. The zucchini, the garlic is really good for, I think it's good for tomatoes. I'm not sure. I can't remember that one, but onions definitely. And then you could grow broccoli and cauliflower. And look at all the crops that you'll have. It's amazing with just such little effort. A 4x4 square. It's amazing. So I just want you to remember there's 3 growing seasons: spring, summer, and fall, unless you're a crazy gardener like I am and you want to overgrow all winter long. And we've had good success without even covering. We've had Swiss chard all winter. You just have to brush the snow away a little bit and you'll have that. Or you could cover it with a small hoop thing with a cover on it. Pick vegetables that you love and that will grow well in each season. So pick a different crop from your spring crop, your summer crop, and your fall crop, things that you know you'll eat. Because in the beginning, everything is fabulous and you want to grow everything. But then you have 32 radishes and you don't like radishes. So what do you do with that? I mean, it's good for the soil, but you're going to have to give it away. So don't plant things you don't like. Really think it through, look at your diet, and use your imagination. And as you grow vegetables, you're going to be able to know what they like, what their growing conditions are. Do they like to grow with this? Do they like to grow with that? How does it look? Were they too tall where you had them? Maybe you want to move them next year and put them in a different location. So look at your seed packets. They'll tell you the height of what the plant is going to be. Remember, you need to consider that. You don't want to shade things. Or maybe you do. Maybe you want to plant something a little bit higher to shade your lettuce. Because just like people, when we're hot, we want shade. So in our really hot summers, you have to shade your plants or they stop growing, they stop producing fruit. We've had that in our garden last year. Our tomatoes just did not want to produce fruit. It was very slow. And when September came and things started to cool off, oh, we had a surge of tomatoes. Add companion flowers just for the beauty and for the health of the plants, for pest control. Find new recipes for your harvest and share them with your friends. And whatever you have excess, think about local food banks you can donate to. And when all else fails, remember, you can always compost things and you'll get that goodness back into your soil eventually. So with this, I just like you to enjoy your square foot garden. I hope this information will spur you on to start your own garden, even if it's only 1 square foot. Enjoy it. And we have Mel is encouraging you to go out there and at least start a square foot garden for yourself and your children. So we have all of Mel's books here. They're on the internet. There, you can buy them all over. They're really good. We even have Spanish editions. It's fabulous. And I tell you, this book here is my favorite. Square Foot Gardening by Mel. It's a really good book. It has more information that you'll need. It's really good for advanced gardeners because it has complete succession planning for 3 seasons and for overwintering. It tells you exactly when to seed, when to not seed. It's fabulous. And I think you all have this resource page. And I truly thank you for listening. And I hope it was something that will spur you on to grow.
Nina, would you take a few questions?
I would love it.
Okay, they're both actually about the growing medium.
Yes.
The first one asks, could you use aged compost and purchase topsoil?
Yeah,
Yes.
you can. Okay. But it's not going to be like when you start with that type of a mixture, it's not going to be as good as Mel's mixture because you're going to have to build that topsoil. Okay. It's going to take a couple of years to get your soil really good with microorganisms because it's just fresh out of the bag and you need to work it. You need to get it, the whole soil thing to gel and form a soil biomass for you to get really good soil.
Okay. And the second one was, once you have a raised bed established, how should you amend the growing medium the following year or subsequent years?
Okay, so remember with the square foot method, every time you grow something, you harvest it, you put compost in. Okay, then you plant something else. So over the winter, you always cover your soil because you're gonna prevent it from the harsh winter weather. You're gonna feed it with a layer of compost, a layer of leaf mulch. You can cover it with plastic. I would recommend you put organic material in there, whatever you have available, and let it rot during the winter. When you have a garden, your soil is like a pet and you need to keep it fed, okay? They're gonna slow down, their appetites are gonna decrease in the winter, but they need food, they need air, they need water. So remember that. You just don't leave bare soil because you're gonna lose a lot of the topsoil and it's going to create havoc with your garden. I hope that answered the question.
Very well, yes. Thank you so much for this wonderful, really informative talk. I think a lot of us have been inspired to start a square foot garden.
I
and,
hope so. I hope
the,
so.
the thanks
And-
are pouring in. So thank
Good,
you, Nina.
good. Thank you very much for listening. It was a pleasure. Good way
Okay,
to spend the
bye-bye.
morning. Take care.